I begin with a true story, and I will entitle this A Prisoner of My Past. When I was like 13 or 14 years old, my first cousin, whose family had separated and divorced, he moved in with us for a few months because of the family situation. And he was enrolled in school. We was in like the 8th grade. And he had a math teacher who he just did not get along with. And so as time went on, he became so upset at her that he wanted revenge. He says, let's get some eggs some night and go over and egg her house. I was all for it. That sounded like lots of fun, right? She lived one street over from us, and she wasn't my teacher, but I would gladly help him clear his agony of his mind. So we bought a dozen of eggs. We waited a couple days. And then after dark, we went over. So we're in the alley between our house and her house. It's dark. And so we began to get the eggs and we began to throw. It was beautiful. We could hear it pop, pop, pop. And then we heard this big crash. We didn't know if it was the picture window or the awning. Anyway, it scared us. And so we took off, forgot the eggs in the carton, went running down the alley, out into the street. Unfortunately, there was a street light there, and we went home. The next day, the phone rang at my house, and my mother answered. And I could tell by the expression on her face, she's got these great big brown eyes. She wasn't moving, but her eyes was looking all over the room and finally lit on me, and I knew I was in a heap of trouble. She hung up. I says, what's wrong? She says, we need to talk to your dad. There's trouble. The last thing I want to do is talk to my dad, right? So Dad comes home. She explains it to him. And this was the story. Somebody had egged the school teacher's house the street over. And there was two kids running underneath the street light. One had brown hair and one had blonde hair. And we were the only two in a neighborhood like that. But oh no, it wasn't us. Now my dad says, now listen, I will back you up. If you did it, I'll support you. Just tell me the truth. Dad, we didn't do it. We wouldn't do nothing like that. And my dad says, listen, if you're telling me the truth, what we're going to do, we're going to go over to the math teacher's house and you're going to look her in the eye and say, we didn't do it. That's the last thing I wanted to do was go over and face the lady, right? But of course, Dad, we will gladly go over because we didn't do it. We don't have no idea what happened here. So we did. We got in the car. We went to the door, knocked on the door. The door opens up and we walk in. And we say, listen, though, we've heard of the circumstances, but we didn't do it. We wouldn't do a thing like that. We just don't understand, but we're so sorry it happened. And perhaps she says, well, if you know who did it, will you let me know? Oh, absolutely. If we find out any information, we will let you know. But it wasn't us. We didn't do it. So we walked out of the school teacher's house, seemingly cleared, but fear and conscience was still raining down on us. So my cousin got this great idea, says, listen, we got to clear our names in this situation. We've told her we didn't do it, but they probably don't believe us. I said, what can we do? He said, let's get one of our friends to egg our house some night, and we'll be sure that we stay home. Great idea. We went to a friend. He says, I would love to do it. I says, we'll pay you. He says, no way. He says, if I get caught, then I'm in a heap of trouble. He says, but I know who you can get. There was a kid in school, our age, 13, 14 years old. If there was a mafia in our hometown, he was the boss. He was a drug dealer, just one of those type that would just love to help us out. So we gave him like $20 a piece. Now understand, in that time period, minimum wage was like $2 an hour. So this guy was coming out really grinning. He says, I'll gladly do it. He says, I'll get paid for something I'd like to do anyway. So what he did, we planned the night, we stayed home, He bought a 6-pack of beer, drank it all down, went down to the alley, and just bombarded her house. And obviously, he either hit the awning or the window because there was a big boom. And so immediately, the phone rings at our house. And my brother comes out and looks at us, and he says, "I'm sure glad you guys are here. We just went to bed." And we said, "What's wrong?" He says, "The math teacher's husband's on the phone." And when my dad realized that we were there and it wasn't us, oh, have mercy. My dad lit into them. Oh, it was terrible. It really was. So we have now cleared our name. What a great victory that it was. Well, the celebration lasted for about a day because the next day the phone rang again. It was a math teacher. She wanted my dad, myself, and my cousin to come over, and she didn't say why. So we went. We drove over. Knocked on the door opens up, we walk in. And here's this older school teacher humbly apologized to us for falsely accusing us. Oh, we looked her in the eye and says, "Don't worry about it. Those things happen. We understand. You're forgiven." And we walked out of that house by circumstances truly cleared because she thought somebody else did it. But in reality, we were still guilty. A few years later, October 23rd, 1976, I began to see myself as a lost sinner as I truly was. God began to convict me, and I knew I was facing hell without any hope. And I got right with God. I confessed my sins to Him and accepted Him as my Savior. And once I got saved, it was a wonderful thing. But I could begin to remember my past sins that need to be corrected. Oh yeah, God had forgiven me. But you know what? The Bible teaches us that we got to make our wrongs right as much as possible. And I realize some things are so far gone and people has passed on that we can't make them right. But if we can, we need to. It says in Leviticus, the 6th chapter, verse 1, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, If a soul sin and commit a trespass against the Lord, and lie unto his neighbor, in that which was delivered him to keep, or in fellowship, or in a thing taken away by violence, or have deceived his neighbor." Verse 5 says, "Or all that about which he has sworn falsely, he shall even restore it in the principal, and shall add the 5th part more thereunto, and give it unto him to whom it appertaineth, in the day of his trespass offering." Didn't steal from her, but I had lied, and I had to make that right, because in my conscience, I was wrong. So I did go back over. Drove over, knocked on the door opens. I said, "Hello, do you remember me?" And I explained, and she did remember. And I told her I was guilty, and we explained, or I went along. My cousin this time, he was back in Georgia. I explained how we cleared our name per se and asked for her forgiveness. And in graciousness, she did forgive me. So now I was clear with God, I was clear with her, and I cleared my conscience. God has given us a conscience that we know what is right and what is wrong. It is the most wonderful thing in the world to be clear with God, to be clear with man, and to have a clear conscience. You know, many people have done things wrong and have never gotten caught, but their conscience will follow them to the grave because they are a prisoner of the past of their own actions. But God can forgive us, not only forgive us, but clear our conscience. And trust me, That's a wonderful thing.